Hi, it's Bear Gardener, here with yet another YouTube video. This time it is my guide to how to play Frontline. So I get asked this question a lot, and I see it being asked a lot in various places. If Frontline is so good, people will ask, how is it that you can get wins on it? How do you play it well? I get asked questions about this quite regularly, so we're going to do this. We're going to see whether people enjoy this. So this is going to be a detailed commentary. I will talk a bit about the deck and what we want from the deck and what we're trying to do with it. There will be some gameplay with my own commentary on my own games. I will critique some of my own games, illustrating what I consider to be useful points. If you like this, if this is something you find useful and you would like to see more of, please comment. It's the only way I know. So these are not quick videos to make, because these videos require quite a lot of production. A lot of the videos I make tend to be a lot quicker for me to make. This sort of thing requires production value. I need to take time to figure out how I'm going to make it, put it all together. So I need to know that people want to see these and find them useful. If they do, I will absolutely keep making them. Reasons why you should listen to what I've got to say, because I feel like I should justify myself here. I'm an experienced player of card games. I've been playing collectible card games and competitive games of varying stripes, from chess to tabletop games to collectible card games, for over 30 years. I'm generally considered to be pretty good at it. With regards to cards, I field-marshalled in my first 14 days. I was top 60 in season 2 or 3 of my play. I am generally considered to be okay. I don't compete because I choose not to. I have it on good authority from good players that if I wanted to, I probably could compete, and that's nice to know, but it's not what I'm here for. I'm here to have some fun and help other people enjoy the game. So that's what I'm going to do. Anyway, that's possibly reasons why you should listen to anything I've got to say. Right, let's talk about Frontline. Specifically the classic US-German Frontline deck, which is around forever. This is my current preferred list. There are small variants out there. There are always going to be. Nothing is perfect. Everyone has slight niggles and differences play-wise, but I'm going to go through this card by card and talk about how it gets us to do what we want to do. But first of all, let's talk about what this deck wants to do and how it goes about winning. So, this deck is called Frontline because that is how this deck thrives. We want to have control of, or at the very least ensure our opponent doesn't have control of the front line for the majority of the game. By doing so, we can build a board state which can take advantage of our finisher. So the first card we're going to look at is Blitzkrieg. This is our usual finisher. This gives friendly units in the front line +3 attack and allows them to operate for 1 less until the end of your turn. You have 4 units in the front line. This is an additional 12 damage in addition to whatever they represent themselves. This is 9 times out of 10 how we're going to win a game. This is what we aim for. Right, how do we get there? So this is where we're just going to go card by card through the deck and talk about how we get there. 164th Infantry. This is a 1 cost, 0 op cost, 1/1 unit that blitzes and has a destruction effect. Give a random friendly unit +1/+1. This is a really good card for us. Not always for the reasons that you think. Obviously, you can look at this and go, the big value in this is going to be trading out into something so that you can then get the +1/+1. Weirdly, a lot of the time, this is actually not what we use this card for. If we are up against another deck which we know is going to want to compete early for the front line, aggro decks like Japan, Germany aggro, Japan, Russia aggro, hyper aggro, another frontline deck, Japan, Finland salvage, another Germany mid-range deck. These are all decks that want to compete for the front line. If we are on the play, which is to say we start with 4 cards and we get to play first before we get to actually draw a card, we really want to see this against these decks because we wish to drop this on turn 1 and put it into the front line, and we don't particularly care if it ends up getting destroyed and we lose the bonus. The key is to make sure that it is not likely that we are going to have to actually work to get to the front line. We want the next turn, where we have 2 credits, to be able to get into the front line with something that can stick. Which leads us on to M8 Greyhound, 1/3 tank with Blitz, 1 drop, 1 op cost. While in the front line, units in your support line have +1 attack. Honestly, we don't care. It's completely irrelevant to us. We never use this. However, what we do care about is that this is a 1 cost, 1 op cost, that is 2 credits to put it down and put it into the front line, because it can blitz, unit, that has 3 defense, which makes it hard to remove. This is a great unit for our turn 2 drop. Red Devils is the gold standard for our turn 2 play, because when we put this in the front line, not only does it do everything that Greyhound does, except being able to attack on the same turn should we have 3 credits, and we'll talk about why ping damage is not something we really care about that much later. What this really does is not only put a 1/3 body that's awkward to remove, but make your opponent have to pay an extra credit for everything that they use to remove it. So if it's going to take them 2 cards to remove this, and they're relying on the fact that they have 0 operation cost cards, they're in for an unfortunate circumstance, because both of those cards to operate will cost 1 because of the Red Devil's text. This is amazing, and one of the strongest cards we have in the game. We also have 99th Infantry. This is just good in a front line. If we control the front line, give another friendly unit +2/+2. If on turn 3, we can put +2/+2 on the Red Devils, we now have a 3/5 that costs our opponent an extra credit to deal with. Very bad for them. Panzer 35T, this might as well be considered one of the signature cards of this deck. As long as you control infantry, instead of being a 2/2 that costs 2 to deploy and costs 1 to operate, it has 0 operation cost, meaning that for 2 credits we can drop it, move to the front line, and attack. We're going to do this a lot. One of the strongest cards in our deck. 22 Infantry Regiment, another from our German ally. If you control the front line at the end of your turn, draw a card. Card draw is something we want. You always want card draw in this game. This is our draw engine. This is our early draw engine. It can also, if our opponent doesn't do something about it, become a consistent problem for them, because the more we draw cards, the better value we get out of this, and later on in the game we can just shove it into the front line as a body, which you will do on a regular basis. 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment. It's a 2 cost, 2/3, doesn't have blitz, but it does have smoke screen, and at the end of your turn you give a random friendly infantry unit +2 attack. It's an infantry unit, so at best you have a 50-50 chance of it buffing the infantry unit you care about, which is not usually it until later in the game. There are edge cases. In particular, if this ends up buffing itself a lot and you can push it forward and put 99ths +2/+2 on it, this can become a very powerful unit, but most of the time we want it to be dropping buffs on other infantry. C-47 Skytrain is an interesting card and a strong tool, but one that I don't necessarily recommend you play with if you're not used to playing frontline. You can replace this with any other card for a while. It's generally the last elite I recommend you craft for this deck. The reason being, it depends when you deploy this as to what its value is. It has risks. If you get compressed into your support line, this can prevent you deploying important units. And some of the units it can spawn, things like Jasko, we're looking at you, have no offensive value and a high op cost, which can be awkward. Also, if your opponent has access to suppress, this can just become a brick that sits in your support line, occupying space that you want for other things. It is still really good when played well, but it's one of the tougher tools to use, and quite often I play games and win them without dropping the Skytrain. card I play all the time is the M10A1. This is one of our most powerful tools. No, it doesn't have Blitz. However, it does have Suppress. Now, Suppress is really important to us because we will often use this to turn off an incredibly powerful enemy effect that's causing us a problem. For example, bricking our opponent's Skytrain. We can also use this, and regularly do, to remove guard when we're about to have lethal. Drop one of these, play Blitzkrieg, and you can remove a guard and swing. Where you will win against guard heavy decks on a regular basis. This card is gold. Always run 3 of them. Personal advice, but I would stick to it. Another incredibly potent tool, the M18 Hellcat. This is one of the most versatile tools late in the game for us. It is a 3-cost, 1-op cost card. It is a tank with Blitz, which means realistically we want to operate for 5 credits because we want to drop it, move, and attack using Blitz. So I want 5 credits to play this. This wins games regularly. This plus Blitz, this plus Blitzkrieg, can absolutely finish an opponent who's on low health. I cannot count the number of times that's how I've won a game. Because my opponent manages to clear the front line, can't actually take it, or can only get 1 unit into it, and then it's just blip, blow up whatever's in the front line, drop the Hellcat, move it forward, and either the 4 damage or the 4 damage plus Blitzkrieg is enough to win you the game. It's incredible. Blitzkrieg we've talked about. 327th Pathfinders. Possibly my favourite card in this deck, because I am at heart a bit of a control player, and this is one of the most potent tools for control that this deck has, because this will kill your opponent's board position and tempo. Deployment, so it's a 2-2, 3-cost, 2-2 with 1-op cost that we really don't care about. What we do care about is its deployment effect. Deal 2 damage to a unit. If this destroys that unit, 327th Pathfinders becomes a veteran. When this veterans, it gains Blitz. We don't care. However, we don't want to put it in the front line. We don't want to risk it being killed, because as long as this is veteran, not suppressed, and still alive, at the start of our turn, a random enemy unit retreats, either from the front line to the support line or from the support line to hand. This will kill your opponent's credit economy, board position, and general tempo. It wins games. Always try and leverage this when you can, but make sure you don't try and leverage this in the hope that it gets you the front line. Play it when you know it will get you the front line. M16 Half Track. I run one of these. Some people don't. Some people also run 2 of these. I think 1's enough. We're really in this for the deployment effect. And why would we care about a simple retreat when we've got Pathfinders? Because this, when we are dealing with, for example, 1 awkward unit in the front line that we need to push back so that we can retake the front line, or a really annoying guard that we don't have the ability to suppress, this often resolves that issue. It can also take a very dangerous aircraft or bomber back off the board, especially after it's been buffed. Remember, you bounce it back to their hand, it will lose all of the buffs that it has. Powerful tool when used well. A lot of the time you won't use it, but you will miss it when you don't have it. Devil's Brigade. I like this inclusion for lots of different reasons. Aside from anything else, this is an incredibly strong unit. It is a 3-cost or 1-op cost Blitz unit that's 3-3. So really good body for 5 credits into the front line. 4 credits into the front line. 3+1, it can't attack. But it also has deal 1 damage to an enemy on deployment. This can be great if you've got an enemy on 1 health. Note, enemy. It can also target the opponent's HQ. If the opponent only has 1 HQ defense left, this is game. And it will happen. Finally, it is an edge case, but there are some very strong Alpine units in the game. Baron of Vichy, if you play against Soviets, is a big target for this. If you deal 1 damage to that unit, it just destroys it. really powerful. Run 2 of them because I love them. 5th Rangers. This is another archetypical card for this deck. This is the Swiss Army, or rather US Army knife of this deck. So its deployment effect is what makes it good, because when we deploy this 4 cost, we can choose one of 2 things. We can reduce its operation cost to 0, which lets us put a 4/4 body into the front line for 4 credits, which ain't nothing. Or we can turn it into an 8/8, which does have an operation cost of 4, but is a big unit. 9 times out of 10, we're going to play this as a 4/4 with 0 op cost. This is just ways to keep the front line. This is a great body for doing that job. We will never regret seeing this card. Speaking of never regretting seeing a card, M4 Sherman. This is our secondary draw engine. It's a great body. It's a 4/4 body, it's a tank, it's quite expensive because 2 op cost ain't nothing for us because we usually have other things that we want to do, but it can still be potent. And if we can get it into the front line and then later on get Blitzkrieg on it, then it becomes a 7 damage for 1 credit swing, which ain't nothing either. The key though is deployment. If you have a US unit in the front line, draw 2 cards. Card draw is everything, we want card draw all the time. This particular card is one of the strongest draw engines in the game, because we got a really potent body and 2 cards. It's incredible. Granted, they're random cards, but we've got good cards in the deck that we want to see. Never gonna regret this, just always remember you need a US unit. Your German allies, excuse me, don't count. Speaking of our German allies, this is the 20 Panzer Grenadier, also known as the German Sherman. It is about to be changed to have a defense of only 3. You're not going to care that much, but it is relevant. It's still a very strong card. It needed a toning down, though, because this is an insane card. So it is 4 cost and has Blitz. So for 5 credits, we can put a 3/4, or in the future, a 3/3 body into the front line. So far, so okay. It's not bad. However, on deployment, we had a Panzer 35T, we all remember how much we love those, and a Combined Arms to our hand. Combined Arms gives a friendly tank +1/+1 for each unit type you control. Infantry, tanks, artillery, bombers, fighters. 5 infantry types, so it maxes out at +5/+5. The key is that when you have 8 credits, this is a 3/3, as I say, the defense is being lowered, body into the front line, plus a Panzer 35T, which triggers its deployment effect because you already have an infantry, you just played one, which you then buff, and you control 2 unit types, a tank and an infantry, by 2/2, so that gives you, effectively, a tank version of the 5th Rangers into the front line, into the bargain. It's amazing. This is one of the strongest cards in this deck. It is so potent. It gives you such an advantage on board. Finally, strategic bombing. This is our we've got problems just making sure we keep the front line card. All targets in the enemy support line take 3 damage. Note, this includes HQ. Again, if your opponent has 3 HQ defense left, this is game for 6 credits. A lot of the time, though, what we're going to use this to do is stop our opponent from being able to retake the front line by damaging or destroying units in their support line to avoid them being able to trade out effectively. Because the heart of everything we do on this deck is trading well and holding the front line until such time as we can finish the game. We don't rush. We're not interested in ping damage. I mentioned this earlier. A lot of the time, you are better served using a credit that you could use to activate an attacking unit to move another unit into the front line to get another body there to make it harder for your opponent to actually get you out of it. You care about attacking when you have Blitzkrieg or when you know you have lethal. On the whole, this is, for me, without doubt, the best deck to learn this game on. I will die on this hill. This deck teaches you the fundamentals of this game in a way that almost nothing else does, because it puts you in good habit. It teaches you to understand the value of units in trading. It teaches you to understand positioning and board strength over damage. It teaches you to value trade, which is to say get as much out of your card as possible. And it teaches you to recognize the maths for finishing a game. These are all fantastic. Played well, this deck is one of the most consistent in the game. I thoroughly recommend you play it a lot, enjoy it. I'm going to cut in a minute to some gameplay so you can see it with my commentary on how I play the game. I hope you find this useful. If you do, as I say, leave comments down below. Okay, that's the waffle done. Let's cut to the good part. So, we open up. The first thing we're going to want to do is look at what we're playing against. So, our opponent is also playing US, so we're thinking either frontline or ramp. This will affect our mulligan, as we will have discussed. So this isn't great. We're looking at this and thinking, okay, I don't really want to see blitzkrieg this early. Certainly don't want to see strat bombing. Greyhound's good though, because it gives us, as we say, that one drop. I'd really like to see 164th, because I am on the play, which is to say, playing before drawing means I get the first play, and I'd like to see 164th, which I can put into the front line to make sure that my opponent doesn't. Not the end of the world, but we do need to adjust. So strat bombing goes, blitzkrieg goes. We keep 5th rangers because it's just a good drop. This could be worse, but we'll see where we go with it. So obviously Greyhound down gives us the one drop that we want to operate with. Our opponent's going to do exactly the same, and that's fine. So at this point, we're fine. We wait on our draw. We've got another Greyhound, so this is good. Greyhound to the front line is going to be awkward for our opponent to remove with only a Greyhound to operate with. There are not many 2-credit answers that are going to help them. Realistically, because they don't have Red Devils, they can't just drop Panzer 35T hitters and then hit with the Red Devils. But even then, we're on pretty safe ground. So we push forward, relatively confident. We drop the second Greyhound because we are going to want to be aware of staying wide. PIR. Okay, so Parachute Infantry Regiment right now is the thing. We've got to be cautious that we don't let this spiral. Red Devils is great. You'll know I very quickly am straight into the front line with this. The value of this card is immense. The fact that it costs an extra point to operate against is huge. Also, it's perfect credit economy here. Now, no, I am not pinging the HQ for a point of damage. I would rather go wide and be patient than chip away at the HQ and risk losing the front line. Probably can't emphasize this enough, but I'll probably do a pretty good job of emphasizing it endlessly in these videos. Called frontline for a reason. Now, we've still not seen our opponent's ally, so at the moment we're assuming that our opponent is going to be playing US-Germany. It's the most common combo. So our opponent here chooses to trade out a 164th, which gives them a big bulky unit to operate against us. We're not too worried because we do have an M10A1, which can remove all of that issue very quickly. And we're still wide, so they're going to trade out for one unit. That's fine, we're not overly worried. So, now we take a look and see. So M10A1 goes straight down. The reason being that M10A1 is going to be a perfect way of removing all of that buff nonsense. So now we're back to dealing with the 2-3. Now we can take a point to ping somewhere because we can. We have the spare credit. But that's the only time I'm going to be pinging HQ, is when I don't have anything better to do with that credit. If that unit had blitz, if M10A1 had blitz, I'd rather move it into the front line. but obviously it doesn't. Opponent continues trying to clear, which is good tactics from them. They know they need the front line, and they don't want us to have it. Jasko's quite irritating because it does reduce damage to HQ by 1, but on the whole, we're not worried. Push forward, so we've once again gone wide, so we get the point of ping, but more importantly 3 units, and they only have 2 offensive units and a full backline. Now that full support line is great for us because it means we're in really strong control here. They'll trade out, also gives them room to deploy another unit. The Sky Train I would consider to not have been the best play for our opponent. It runs the risk of just clogging up their support line with units that can't help them get the front line back, and they need to get the front line back against us. Seeing frontline or US play a Sherman like that tells you that you're in control, so we take that as a very positive sign. We've got our own Sherman. Now we could fifth the Rangers, but I take a moment to just think here. But then I think, yeah, I could play the Sherman for draw here and draw 2 cards. However, it doesn't have Blitz, and I don't know what I'm going to get. I can, in this instance, get another body, a 4/4, into the front line and set up draw, which is strictly better. Love to see the Panzer. Once again, you'll notice we're not hammering away at anything, we're not trading, we don't need to. We're going to leave that to our opponent. Our opponent's going to do the hard work for us because we are holding the front line, which is what this deck is all about. So, trade out here, that's fine, costs them 2 credits and a good unit. Slowing our card draw. Now, could be bad, but we don't really mind. We have 3 cards in hand and we know one of them is Sherman, so we have draw if we need it. Panzer to the front line again. We want to go wide. We want to make sure we have bodies. I would normally say if you're going to draw first, but there is nothing that we would draw that would change that play, and as you can see, in this case, I had no intention of drawing. I want to mute the Jasko so that we can actually ping some damage now that we're in a position to be able to do so. Because now we can start to apply pressure, because our opponent is in a very difficult position. So we're presenting, and we need to be aware that we're presenting a decent amount of damage. So we're presenting 8 damage on the line. That 8 damage with a Blitzkrieg would go up to 17, which is always important. And my maths is terrible. That 8 damage would actually go up to substantially more than that. It would go up to 20, but my point remains the same. We're presenting a lot of damage. Our opponent plays Naval Supply Run. Now, we learn a lot of things here. Firstly, we know our opponent is in a pretty tough position because they're willing to play this on the back foot. They want the front line back. Secondly, we now know our opponent's ally is Japan, which means we can expect things like Winter Regiment, because that would just make sense. It's such a strong play in this deck. We need to be cautious of that, because at all costs, we don't want to lose the front line. The phrase lose the front line versus always have the front line may be relevant later. So we've got strap bombing, and we're going to use it because we just want to get, at the moment, we want to keep the pressure up. We can get some value out of strap bombing here. We have a unit that we can push up. Now, we just choose to go face because we're saying to our opponent, you need to trade out if you want to beat us. They've lost a Sherman to the discard. They don't really mind. They're not using it right now. Here's the Winter Regiment, as expected. That's going to trade out and heal itself, which we don't like. We're aware that we have to do something about that Winter Regiment. Thankfully, we are in a position to get some cards. So the play here is obviously take the front line and draw. I choose to actually go Red Devils, I think. Yeah, because I know I'm going to lose the unit, and I want the big push from the Panzer Grenadier a little bit later. We are going to suffer. There is going to be some trading out here. Winter Regiment is going to be a pain. Key here, though, is I want to make sure that my opponent has to use their units, because neither of these units are tanks. They can't attack and move. So even if our opponent trades out here, they can't take the front line. I remind you of my earlier comment about the difference between having the front line and making sure your opponent can't take it from you. We may not have the front line, but we haven't lost it, and we have a 5-5 to take it back, depending on what one drop our opponent has. It's Red Devils this late in the game, it's a lot less good. So, we drop the Panzer here, which is good. I am about to make a huge mistake. Spot it with me. So we swing with the Panzer Grenadiers. This is good. Our opponent loses it. We push forward with the tank. This is good. This is, oh dear. So, did we spot what Bear did wrong here? I could be buffing the big tank in the front to be larger, which would remove it from a removal range. But we are out of range. We're okay. You could argue, as I would, that I should probably have combined arms the big tank to make the trade out harder, because as it is, even though it is out of regen range, as in it can't be swallowed up by the Winter Regiment, my opponent can still clear it and probably play something else to clear down. Arguable, but all we have to do is hold our ground. The M10A1 right now just clears to give our opponent a good trade, which is good play. But we have a Greyhound, which is good. We have therefore a way to get to it. Got Pathfinders, which is really good right now. So this is where we think a little carefully. So we're going to put, obviously, the Greyhound into the front line, and we're going to buff it, because we want to put our opponent under heavy pressure. We're going to use Pathfinders, removes one unit, we're going to push up, play the Skytrain, and then we use the spare credit to do damage. Now, we have emptied our hand, but we're saying to our opponent, answer the board or you lose. And that's all we can do right now. We are in control. Our opponent has a strong regiment on the back line, but it's on its own. Winter Regiment is not going to win our opponent this game. They need something to support it. They're going to take a while to look at their hand, decide how they want to do this. There are definitely things that they could do. So we know that they've got a plan. Good trade. They get the Winter Regiment back, but they're still facing lethal. Greyhound. It's not going to help them. Infantry. Pinks takes. This is really good play from our opponent, because the Greyhound now could have traded out, but such is life. Our opponent surrenders, and we have the win. Again, the defining point of this is that we won this by virtue of making sure we maintained the front line and played it well. Same deal as before. As we come into this, the first thing we're looking at is what are we playing against. So we have US. Once again, general assumption would be this is likely to be frontline or ramp. So our starting hand is all of the good stuff, but possibly too much good stuff. So we're going to pitch the Greyhound to see if we can get something for a bit later, but I'm never going to object to having two Red Devils in my starting hand. This is illustrative of what I was talking about with the deck description and the early usage of the 164th. This is a pure frontline control play. I don't want to risk my opponent being able to do the same thing to me and compete for the front line early, so I'm going to put a body in there, and we're going to therefore say my expectation is to see 164th to hit me. Yep, and this is exactly what happens. This is a perfectly fine trade for me, because I have now got 2 credits, which allows me to get my best awkward/defensive unit, Red Devils, straight into the front line. This can be, honestly, at times, this is the sort of thing that a game, especially a mirror match, if it turns out to be one, can turn on. Super tight lines are really quite important. We want to minimize our mistakes. In this case, we're just giving ourselves the best possible position. So our opponent's likely to have a very awkward hand by the look of it, because they have chosen to drop a unit that isn't currently doing anything and is tremendously vulnerable. So now we have to decide what we want to do about it. I'm going to make use of Red Devils here. Now, normally I wouldn't do this because I don't have the 1 credit to push them up, but I still have an awkward unit in place, and this is another 3 defense body that I will be able to get in next turn, and that point of ping just denies my opponent yet more board position and tempo. Hellcat, big play. Our opponents really come out swinging here. I'm very quickly reaching for, okay, if you want to swing, we'll make it awkward. And we do. Now, no, I do not remove the Hellcat here. I don't just choose to trade out. I'm going to let my opponent decide how they want to do that. They may well remove the Red Devils, but it's very expensive. They could remove the Devil's Brigade too. I'm not overly worried. This is their best trade, but very expensive, which then limits them, and as such, they once again have to play a unit which isn't really doing anything for them. Big advantage for us. Seeing an M10 again is always a good sign. We like to see that just in case there's anything we need to suppress, but at the moment we don't. Sherman for the draw. Got a 1-drop that we can push, so we do. Same rule as ever. We've got 3 units in the front line. Our opponent only has 2 units to respond with, which means that it's going to be very hard for our opponent to completely remove us. Always what we want to see. Also, we have a great trade if our opponent doesn't remove the 164th. It's a beautiful trade, as it is. It's fine. We're still going to get a strong trade. Our opponent removes the unit. Red Devils comes out. Pathfinders is awkward. So this is something that we have to be aware of. So we're going to look at our options. Pulled them the Sherman, which is nice. Straight in. We know we want that 4/4 body. M10A1, this is just, I don't want to deal with Pathfinders, so I'm not going to. Drop the Red Devils, and then I want to really trade here, so I'm going to. Why do I want to trade here? Because I don't want to get blown out twice in the next turn, and I don't think our opponent is going to be able to remove us. So our opponent only has 3 damage on board, which isn't enough to remove the Sherman, which then means that I'm pretty certain that I'm going to be able to get at what is now a 2/4 Red Devils. By the way, I knew that was going to be a 2/4 Red Devils because that was the only target for the 164th. I mean, any target would have been fine, but 2/4 Red Devils is just a beautiful thing to have. Opponent plays Panzer Grenadier, 20 Panzer Grenadier here. It's a strong card, but not in this situation, because the 2/2 that they can drop here isn't supremely great, because if they drop the 2/2, they can't trade out. If they don't drop the 2/2, they leave themselves with only 1 unit in the support line, when we know what's in their hand. If you're not remembering what you expect to be in their hand from things that you've seen, you can always click on the eyeball symbol. I forget to remind people that it exists, but you should totally use it. Really, we're just going to fill the front line here. I thought about whether I'd draw, but I really don't want to. Instead, we're just going to blitzkrieg, take the game. Like, we're in such a strong position now that our opponent. So early blitzkrieg doesn't always have to be a finisher. What this has done is just put us in a position. Now, the reason that I was willing to do this, I should explain this, is that I know I have a Hellcat in hand. So even if my opponent is somehow able to completely clear the board, odds are they won't be able to do that and occupy the front line, or I'll find a way to trade. So we're going to see what they can do. We know they're going to make this into a 4/4. Oh, they got another one. That was a bit of a surprise, but that's okay. So we've got 4/4. 2/2 trades out. The 4/4 will also trade. Now the problem they've got is the 1-3 can't trade, and we know we have game. They can't, but we know, as noted, that it was unlikely they were going to remove us. Hellcat's game. No reason to do anything fancy here. Send the good game. Take the win. Again, just clean lines, good awareness, play the game according to what our own strategy is. So we're back in. Let's see what, again, as soon as we open up, we're looking. It looks like we have another US matchup. Once again, we know we could be facing Frontline, so we need to be aware. We've got 164, really good to see. Fifth Rangers is nice, but we don't want to see the other two. We'd rather see some earlier plays. Greyhound's great, as it turns out. Red Devils would have been better, but Greyhound is never bad. So we push forward. Same reason as we've illustrated before. This is just denying our opponent options, especially now that we're on the play. So we've got it loose, so that gives us a really strong position. Our opponent's 2-credit play will tell us something about their deck. PIR, so this is going to be interesting because they've clearly had an awkward hand. We have our own PIR, which we will deploy because there's no reason not to. We get lucky, it buffs the mini regiment, so now all of our opponent's trade options are terrible. So they're going to use duress. It's their best bet at the minute. They're going to go for the big trade out, which is fine, but we now have, so that this is the value of not having at any point lost the front line. We have lost control, but at no point have we conceded it. At no point is our opponent controlling it, and that is the key, because we will then push a body up. In this case, we have a fantastically comfortable set of options. We have 5th Rangers in hand, which is a great body, which we're going to deploy. And then we have a 3-4 body in reserve. 5th Rangers is so strong at this point because our opponent can, of course, trade. Now, Skytrain, I talked about this, and I will continue to talk about this. You have to be confident that you're going to get the front line back if you're going to play Skytrain. Now, our opponent doesn't look like that's the case. The best that they could hope for is to clear the front line but not retake it. Skytrain can work against you when it is just spawning things in your support line that you can't play. Do anything with. We can't push up here with the Panzer Grenadier, so we're confident because, again, our opponent doesn't have a lot to work with. Now, they really do need to take the front line from us. So they're going to start flinging crazy kind of attempts at this, and I get this. This is just trying to create a trade. Our opponent has so far traded 2 regiments into our already limited PIR. This is now they're going to go over the top because they're realizing they don't want to. Jasko. Now, we don't like Jasko because Jasko does reduce damage to HQ, but at the same time, we're not overly worried because it's another, as I talked about earlier, this has created another high op cost, meaningless body in our opponent's support line, and now we're just compressing our opponent. This is all we're doing right now, is we're just compressing our opponent. We're going to ping some damage. We've got 7 points of damage that we can drop, which is, of course, reduced by 2 down to 5 because of the Jasko. That's okay, we don't mind. 5 points of damage is still solid, and our opponent is going to have to find a way to unseat us, and we are in an awkward position. Now, Pathfinders is a good play by our opponent here. Because now our opponent really, trading out your Pathfinders when they're veteran like that is less than ideal. It's unfortunate for our opponent here, and especially given that we've now got Hellcat, Blitzkrieg. Now, I make a mistake here, because my maths is set up, but I forget there is a second Jasko on the board. Which is disappointing, because it's reducing all of these damages by 2. As it turns out, it won't matter, but that was presumptuous of me, and I did make a mistake in the maths there. However, the position remains the same. We've got our opponent held in an incredibly difficult position. They're calculating and considering, but it is unlikely that they're going to find a way out. A 4-5 body like that is just game. And it's, again, just compress your opponent, keep them to the back, and win. So we are coming in. Once again, we're glancing up. What are we going to see? So we've got Soviets. Now this can be interesting as a matchup for us. Against Soviets, we have to be aware that they have strong removal tools, especially early on in the game. They have Sickle, which is their 1 cost, 1 damage to HQ, 1 damage to a unit card. They've got, obviously, the Hammer, which is 6 damage later on, and various other removal tools. So we are likely to take a bit more of a kicking in this. This is going to likely to be a longer battle. So we consider our hand with that in mind. I lose the 5th Rangers because I was hoping to get something that I'd have a little bit more early presence. I got unlucky, but I kept the Greyhound because I knew I was going to still want that 1-3 body. We know they're going to sickle. They always... One of the great rules of cards, they've always got a sickle. But it still avoided them dropping a cheap unit and pushing it into the front line. I'd rather they spent a card and a credit to just remove us. So this is self-damage tank, so we think we're playing self-damage right now. That's okay. We don't mind that. Once again, we go wide, saying to our opponent, we're happy to go wide. So now we've got another part of the self-damage package coming down. So when their HQ takes damage, that regiment is going to guard up. But we're just going to let them figure out how they want to do it. They want to find a way to damage their own HQ. So they drop guard, damage to our HQ. And now we're just thinking, if we do this, and then Pathfinder. So again, I'm using Pathfinder very tactically here, so Pathfinder will veteran. So that means we have the retreat effect ongoing, which is always good to see. Our opponent will likely want to do something about that. They have various options. They have a number of 3 credit cards that could destroy the Pathfinders. Apparently, they also like their slow burn tanks. Winter Warfare, bringing the self-damage, which, by the way, will activate the guard. And then they can come forward and trade out. It's ultimately not too bad. We can live with that. So we press the Sherman forward and buff it. So now the Sherman is this big 6-3 tank. Not good news for our opponent. T60 comes down. Another guard goes up. That's okay, we don't mind. So the next thing we're going to do is look at Panzer Grenadier, and when we're going to go off book here. We're not going to buff the Panzer. We're going to create, because we know the enemy is going to be playing big units, we create another big tank. Our opponent surrenders. They don't feel they can beat us at this point. Seems reasonable. Once again, it's all just a matter of control. Okay, so we're back again. Dropped a little bit this time, but we learned we've got Brit matchup. So, this takes to a different tenor of game for us. When we see Britain, we can expect HQ defense gain. We can expect guards. We can also expect various types of aircraft. And we can also expect board clears because they have access to a lot of AoE clear tech. What we don't expect is any speed, so we can really take advantage of quick units here. And that's what we intend to do. So, straightforward. Terrible click here. Sometimes happens to me. Misclicked. Send the appropriate one. Don't over spam, however. So far, so absolutely standard. Greyhound to the front line, pointed ping. We've got the 99 waiting, so 99th is waiting to come give us a strong buff, which can be really good. So it's a ramp deck. We can see them already trying to ramp, which we're fine with. We don't mind playing against ramp. We'll happily take a 3-5, and we'll just keep swinging. At this point, we're in a relatively good position. We've got concerns. Turn 5 is a big one against Brits, because that's when we might see Glamour Boys, which is their big defensive unit. Supply shortage, turn 3 or 4, completely expected. For my opponent, it's interesting. One of the great advantages of the 164th here is that when it explodes, it's going to give +1/+1, so it buys another turn, in this case, for our front-lined already regiment. So that Greyhound is now going to be around long enough to be a proper threat. We're just going wide. We know that the 99th is going away. Sexton comes down, we'll pin the Greyhound. We don't mind, we have Hellcat. Which will plink. Now I could have traded the 164th in, but I didn't want to risk it buffing the Hellcat, because the Hellcat, if it gets the buff, will waste it, because it will still be destroyed when it attacks the arty. That's why we don't do that. It's little nuances, but we know that +1/+1 would at that point be 50-50. It's great if it lands on the Greyhound. It's a terrible waste if it goes on to the Hellcat. So we've removed again another big body, another big threat from our opponent. Monsoon Rot. This is our opponent reaching really hard now because they're very concerned. This is not a great time to play Monsoon Rot unless you can follow it up somehow. It gets rid of one regiment. But we're not overly worried. We're going to draw. Red Devils is just incredible to top deck right now. So we put yet another amazing unit in the front line. Our opponent's on 9 HQ defense, on credit 7. We're in good shape. I'll wait to see what our opponent might have as an answer. We're not sure what it might be. Glamour Boys would be a strong play right now, but we're going to roll Ingenuity. Now, at this point, I am expecting the next play to be Glamour Boys, to gain some HQ defense and put up a guard. It surprised me that we haven't seen it already, and this would be a very strong play right now. But we get a Barracuda, which is an interesting choice. So we've got more pin. This is a different variant. So now we start considering. Half track doesn't help us, because even though the half track would drive the Barracuda off the board, it would also allow the Barracuda to come back and pin us again. M10A1 doesn't buy us anything, so it doesn't remove anything, so we're looking at other options. Sherman gives us draw. Panzer is exactly what we want to see, because it gives us perfect value to remove the bomber and swing. Our opponent's in incredibly difficult shape right now. We have lethal on board, and then some. They know that we have the threat of Blitzkrieg. They are currently figuring out what they might be able to do to stave off, and they feel they can't, which is perfectly valid. Once again, we've just held the line, made sure we got to the front line, occupied it,